He was about to walk into the most important meeting of his life, a meeting that could change the future of his company forever. Every second counted. Every decision felt critical, and the pressure was almost unbearable. But then, something made him stop in his tracks. On the stairwell, hidden from the busy office, a young intern sat quietly, her shoulders shaking, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, the deadlines, the contracts, the endless meetings, all of it faded into nothing. All he could see was her pain, and something inside him refused to ignore it. What happened next would change her life forever and ripple through the company in ways no one could have imagined. Before we begin, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to see the different corners of the world this story is reaching. All right, let's see how one small act of kindness turned an ordinary day into something unforgettable. The office hummed with its usual rhythm. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, footsteps echoing against polished floors. At the center of it all was Mr. Grayson, the CEO of a major firm, tall, composed, and commanding. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built an empire from nothing. People admired him, respected him, and sometimes even feared him. But beneath that polished exterior, there was a man shaped by loss, a man who knew what it meant to carry pain silently. Down the hallway, in the shadows of the stairwell, Lena sat curled on the steps, a young intern, barely 22, with bright eyes that usually sparkle with ambition. Today, however, they were clouded with worry. Her hands trembled slightly, and every now and then, a tear would escape, tracing a path down her cheek. She had always been diligent, quiet, keeping her struggles to herself. But this day, the weight of the world had caught up with her. Marie, Lena's mother, was gravely ill. The medical bills were piling up faster than Lena could manage. She had worked countless hours at the firm, hoping to make ends meet, yet the burden seemed impossible to bear. And now, standing at the edge of despair, she allowed herself to feel it all. The fear, the helplessness, the heartbreak. The stark contrast between the bustling corporate world above and the quiet anguish on the stairwell below could not have been more striking. In that moment, the office was more than just a workplace. It was a crossroads where power met vulnerability, where ambition collided with humanity. And it was here, on those cold steps, that fate quietly waited, ready to intervene. Mr. Grayson paused at the top of the stairwell, his polished shoes barely making a sound against the marble floor. He had expected the usual rush of executives, urgent emails, and the quiet hum of ambition. But this was different. Lena's quiet sobs reached him before her face did, a raw, unfiltered sound that made him stop mid-step. He knelt down slightly, not wanting to startle her, and for a moment, he simply watched. She tried to wipe her tears with the back of her hand, but the tremble in her fingers betrayed her. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke. "My mother, she's very sick," Lena said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how I can afford her treatment. I've tried everything." The word struck him with unexpected force. Memories he had buried long ago came rushing back. The quiet hospital rooms, the scent of antiseptic, the helplessness he felt when his own mother had fallen ill. He remembered the nights of fear, the nights of prayers unanswered, the nights of wishing there had been someone to step in, someone to make it easier. Now, here was Lena, a stranger in the corporate world, facing the same despair he had once felt. His chest tightened, but this time he could act. He could do something. He could make a difference. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He simply looked at her, and she, sensing a quiet strength behind his eyes, let herself hope she hadn't felt in weeks. And in that silence, the world seemed to pause. The hurried office, the looming board meeting, the relentless pressure deadlines, all irrelevant against the weight of human life in need. In that stairwell, fate had shifted. One man's memory, one intern's fear, and one moment of recognition would soon set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. Not just for Lena, but for everyone who worked under the same roof. Mr. Grayson straightened up slowly, his mind racing faster than any boardroom debate ever could. The sound of distant footsteps, the chatter of executives preparing for meeting, it all seemed so trivial now. He glanced at his watch, a subtle reminder of the urgency that had ruled his life for years. But at that moment, the numbers, the schedules, the must-do lists, none of it mattered. Lena's tears had shifted the entire scale of what was important. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Decisions had to be made, not about profits, not about quarterly projections, but about a human life. Without a word, he pulled out his phone, fingers moving swiftly, calling a trusted doctor he had worked with for years. "I need immediate assistance. Patient in critical condition. Full support, no expense spared," he said firmly, his voice calm but resolute. As he spoke, Lena watched him with wide eyes, uncertain, hesitant, almost afraid that the sudden attention would fade as quickly as it had appeared. But he didn't stop. He reached out a hand, not in pity, but in genuine reassurance. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, his tone carrying the quiet weight of someone who had known loss and refused to let another bear it. Within hours, arrangements were underway. Hospital rooms were secured. Specialists were contacted. Treatment plans were approved, and financial barriers that had once seemed insurmountable vanished with a simple phrase. "Take care of her. We'll handle everything." Lena could barely believe it. She had imagined a lifetime of worry, of sleepless nights balancing work and her mother's care, and now, in one surreal moment, everything had shifted. Mr. Grayson didn't stop there. He knew that Lena needed more than medical support. She needed time, space, and the certainty that her job and livelihood were safe. Without hesitation, he placed her on paid leave until her mother's recovery. He understood intimately that worry and guilt were heavy burdens that no one should carry alone, especially not someone so young and devoted. And yet, even as these arrangements were set in motion, a quiet reflection settled over him. He remembered his own mother, the helplessness he had felt, the frustration of watching someone you love struggle without the means to help. This wasn't just business. This wasn't a favor. This was humanity in action. For Lena, the impact was overwhelming. She had spent weeks hiding her fear behind a mask of professionalism, quietly hoping for a miracle she had no reason to expect. And now, here it was, not as a distant dream, but as a tangible reality, orchestrated by someone she had only known in passing, someone with the power to ignore it all and walk away. Yet he didn't. He stepped in. He acted. The office, once a place of rigid structure and endless ambition, felt transformed in that moment. Walls seemed less intimidating, deadlines less crushing. Lena felt, for the first time in weeks, the lightness of hope. And Mr. Grayson, though he would never admit it aloud, felt a quiet satisfaction deeper than any boardroom victory he had ever claimed. He had remembered what mattered. He had chosen humanity over urgency. In the hours that followed, Lena's mother was admitted, treated, and stabilized. And as she finally allowed herself to breathe, Lena understood something profound. Acts of empathy, when wielded with intention and courage, could change lives in ways money and status never could. And in that stairwell, that ordinary corner of a bustling office, a single choice had begun to ripple outward, touching hearts, altering paths, and planting the seeds for a future neither of them could have imagined. Lena left the office that day with a strange mixture of disbelief and relief. The familiar hum of the workplace faded behind her as she stepped onto quiet street. The weight she had carried for weeks suddenly lifted, if only a little. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't have to hide her fear or her exhaustion. She'd been given something she hadn't dared to hope for. Time. Time to care for her mother, time to breathe, and the certainty that her livelihood was secure. At home, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Marie, Lena's mother, had grown weaker with each passing day, her bright spirit dimmed by illness and financial worry. Lena had spent countless nights crying herself to sleep, silently wishing for a miracle. Now, that miracle had arrived. The doctors arrived promptly, reassessing Marie's condition, providing medications, and explaining a treatment plan that Lena hadn't thought possible just days before. Every word, every gesture from the medical staff carried hope. As she watched her mother rest comfortably in the hospital bed, Lena felt a quiet, almost overwhelming gratitude. Tears streamed down her face again, but this time they were different, soft, trembling tears of relief and awe. She thought of Mr. Grayson, the man who had seen her pain, who had chosen to act, who had reminded her that kindness and empathy could exist even in the most unexpected places. The days turned into weeks, and each day Lena spent by her mother's side was a day she could focus on healing, not worrying. She cooked small meals, read aloud to Marie, and for the first time in months, allowed herself to laugh softly again. Each moment reinforced what she had already realized. Support, real, tangible support, could transform despair into hope. Meanwhile, back at the office, her absence was felt, but it was understood. Mr. Grayson made sure everyone knew that Lena's leave was fully supported, setting an example that went far beyond the walls of the boardroom. Colleagues whispered about the CEO who had stopped his meeting to help an intern, but what truly mattered wasn't the gossip. It was the culture he was quietly shaping. A culture where employees mattered as human beings first, not just workers second. One afternoon, as Marie began to regain her strength, Lena sat beside her and took her hand. "Mom," she whispered, "everything's going to be okay now. We're going to get through this together." Marie squeezed her hand, eyes shimmering with both tears and gratitude. And for the first time in months, the fear that clouded their lives seemed to lift just enough for hope to settle in. Through this period, Lena realized something profound. The compassion she had received wasn't just about medicine or paid leave. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, and being given the space to heal. And that realization left a mark on her heart. She knew that when she returned to work, she would carry that experience with her, not as a burden, but as a reminder of what genuine empathy could accomplish. And so, as the days passed, Lena's mother grew stronger, Lena's heart grew lighter, and a small but powerful truth began to emerge. Sometimes, the simple act of giving someone the time and support they need can change the course of their life entirely. In that quiet recovery, the seeds of something bigger were quietly taking root. A lesson in humanity that neither Lena nor her mother would ever forget. When Lena finally returned to the office, it was as if she was walking into a different world. The familiar hum of the workplace was still there. The ringing phones, the chatter of colleagues, the soft click of keyboards. But something had shifted. It wasn't just the air that felt lighter. It was the people themselves. There was a quiet awareness, a subtle understanding that the company wasn't just about deadlines and profit margins. It was about the people who made it run. Colleagues looked at her with a mixture of respect and admiration, but more than that, with empathy. Some whispered in hushed tones about how the CEO had personally intervened, how he had canceled a critical board meeting just to help her, and in turn, others were more open, expressing curiosity about how one act of kindness could ripple through an entire organization. Lena, meanwhile, tried to remain modest, brushing off compliments with a small, grateful smile. But inside, she carried a deep sense of hope and reassurance that she had never felt before. Mr. Grayson observed quietly from his office, noticing the subtle changes in the way his employees interacted. There was less fear, more openness. People seemed more willing to speak up, to share their concerns, and even support one another in ways they hadn't before. The atmosphere, once rigid and strictly professional, now carried a sense of humanity that even the busiest executives could feel. Lena herself noticed it most in the little things. Colleagues checked in on one another without being prompted. Teams collaborated more willingly, and the tension that had once hung over deadlines seemed softer, more manageable. It was as though the entire company had been reminded that behind every title and paycheck was a person with struggles, hopes, and dreams. She also noticed a change in herself. The fear and guilt that had once consumed her when thinking about her mother's illness had been replaced by confidence and gratitude. She carried herself differently now, not just as someone returning to work, but as someone who had been given a lifeline and now understood the power of compassion. Every task she completed, every interaction she had, was tinged with that quiet awareness that kindness could shape the world in ways she hadn't imagined. And Mr. Grayson, though he rarely made a show of it, saw the proof of his belief in humanity every day. One decision, one moment of stopping, one choice to act, had transformed not just Lena's life, but the culture of the company itself. Employees began to approach their work with renewed energy, knowing that they were valued not only for their output, but for who they were as people. It became clear to everyone that the workplace could be more than just a place of transactions and targets. It could be a community, a support system, a place where people cared for one another and looked out for those facing hardships. And it all began with a simple human act. A CEO noticing a young intern cry on the stairwell, choosing empathy over urgency, and proving that even in the most corporate settings, humanity mattered most. In that office, Lena returned not just as an employee, but as a living reminder of the profound impact of compassion. And every time she walked past the stairwell where she had once cried, she no longer felt fear or shame. She felt hope. She felt gratitude. She felt the quiet power of one act of kindness echoing through every corner of her workplace. As Lena settled back into her work routine, she began to notice a new energy in the office, a quiet shift that had started with one act of compassion. And then one morning, an announcement from Mr. Grayson made everything even clearer. The Marie Fund had been established, named in honor of Lena's mother, to support any employee facing serious medical crises. The announcement was simple, but the meaning behind it was profound. Employees listened in hushed awe as the CEO explained how the fund would work: financial support, paid leave, and access to medical resources, ensuring that no one in the company would ever have to face a family health emergency alone. The office, once dominated by deadlines and metrics, suddenly felt warmer, more human. Stories began to emerge. A young father who had been silently struggling to afford his child's surgery found relief through the fund. A single mother navigating her own illness could take the time to recover without fear of losing her job. Each story was a testament to the ripple effect of Mr. Grayson's decision to act with empathy, proving that even the smallest gesture of care could expand into something life-changing for many. Lena watched quietly, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized that her own experience, the fear, the uncertainty, the overwhelming relief, had inspired something far bigger than she could have imagined. The fund wasn't just about money or resources. It was about culture. It was about sending a message. Your humanity matters. Your struggles are seen. And you are not alone. Mr. Grayson continued to observe the impact quietly, noticing the subtle changes in his employees. There was a renewed sense of loyalty, a willingness to go above and beyond, not out of obligation, but because they felt valued, understood, and cared for. The fund became a symbol, not a charity, but of a workplace transformed by empathy, a place where leaders led not just with authority, but with heart. Over time, the Marie Fund helped dozens of employees, each story reinforcing the lesson that had begun with Lena's tears on the stairwell. Small acts of humanity, when carried out with courage and conviction, could create far-reaching change. And for Lena, the fund was a reminder how her life and the lives of so many others had been touched by a single, decisive act of compassion. It was more than just financial assistance. It was a legacy, a reminder that even in the fast-paced, high-pressure world of business, the true measure of leadership wasn't profits or deals. It was a willingness to stop, to see someone struggle, and to act. And so, the Marie Fund stood as a beacon in the company, quietly shaping its culture, inspiring loyalty and saving lives. It was a living testament to the idea that empathy, when acted upon, could ripple outward in ways no one could have anticipated. Weeks turned into months, and the story of Lena, her mother, and Mr. Grayson became more than just an office anecdote. It became a quiet lesson for everyone who witnessed it. In the corners of the company, in whispered conversations and grateful smiles, the ripple effect of that single act of empathy continued to unfold. Mr. Grayson, as he walked through the office, observed the subtle shifts with quiet satisfaction. There was a new energy in the air, not the frantic urgency of deadlines, but a sense of care, of community, of people looking out for one another. It was a reminder that leadership wasn't only about decisions made in boardrooms or strategies executed in meetings. It was about seeing humanity in others and acting on it. Lena, too, carried a lesson with her every day. She had returned to her work, but she was no longer just an intern performing tasks. She had become a symbol of what happens when compassion meets action. She noticed her colleagues supporting each other in ways they hadn't before, checking in when someone seemed overwhelmed, offering help without being asked, celebrating small victories alongside the big ones. The culture had changed, and it began with understanding and empathy. Reflecting on the entire experience, it became clear that moments of humanity often arrive when they are least expected, and their impact can extend far beyond the immediate situation. One person noticing another's struggle, one person pausing in a busy world to offer help, can alter the course of many lives. The CEO's choice to step away from his meeting, to cancel his urgent plans, and to prioritize empathy over efficiency was not just an act of kindness. It was a transformative example of leadership and humanity intertwined. For viewers watching this story, there's a lesson that resonates far beyond offices or corporate walls. Life is unpredictable and hardships come unannounced. But the way we respond, whether we choose to see someone's pain, whether we choose to act with compassion, can change destinies. It reminds us that sometimes the most important meetings we attend are not scheduled on calendars, and the most meaningful decisions we make are not written in memos or spreadsheets. Lena's mother recovered. Lena returned to her work with renewed purpose, and the Marie Fund continued to touch lives across the company. Yet the true change was deeper and quieter. It was in the hearts of those who saw what was possible when empathy led action. It was in the culture of a company that learned, because of one moment, that success is measured not just in profits, but in the lives we uplift, the burdens we share, and the kindness we extend. In the end, the story wasn't just about a CEO, an intern, or a medical emergency. It was about the enduring power of compassion, the ripple effect of human kindness, and the quiet but profound truth that when we choose empathy, we don't just change one life, we change many. And sometimes that choice begins with something as simple as noticing a tear on a stairwell and deciding that it matters. As Lena returned to her routine and the Marie Fund quietly continued to help those in need, the impact of that single moment, the moment Mr. Grayson noticed her cry on the stairwell, could be seen everywhere. It was in the smiles of employees who no longer feared asking for help, in the small gestures of colleagues checking on one another, and in the quiet sense of hope that had settled into a workplace that had once been defined solely by deadlines and performance metrics. For Lena, life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. Her mother's recovery was steady, and she felt a freedom she hadn't known in months. Yet, more than the relief or the support, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes a single act of empathy could shift not just one life, but an entire community. And for Mr. Grayson, the choice to step away from his meeting and act with compassion had created a ripple far beyond the stairwell, reaching into every corner of the company, touching lives he would never even meet. And this is a part of the story that touches everyone watching. Life has a way of placing unexpected challenges in our path. We can choose to rush past them, caught up in our own pressures and priorities. Or we can pause, notice, and act with empathy, with courage, and with heart, because those choices, however small they may seem in a moment, can grow into something extraordinary. Now, the story leaves a question for each of us. What if we noticed the pain of someone around us and chose to act? What if a single moment of kindness could transform a life? Could we be the reason someone finds hope when they need it most? If this story touched you, if it reminded you of the power of empathy, leave a comment below. Tell us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you chose to help someone else in need. Your story can inspire others, just like Lena and Mr. Grayson's story has inspired so many. And if you want more stories that show the strength of the human heart, the courage in small acts, and the hope that can come from unexpected moments, make sure the notification bell so you never miss a story that can lift your spirit, change your perspective, and remind you that compassion matters more than anything. Because in the end, it's not just about what we achieve. It's about the lives we touch, the hearts we heal, and the hope we share. Lena's story, Mr. Grayson's choice, the Marie Fund, all of it is a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can echo far beyond what we imagine. So, take a moment today to notice someone. Take a moment to care. And remember, sometimes the most powerful changes begin with something as simple as stopping to see someone's tears and choosing to act. And so, Lena returned to her life, her mother recovered, and the Marie Fund continued to quietly change the lives of employees across the company. But the true impact went deeper. It was in the hearts of everyone who witnessed what happens when compassion meets action. One moment, one choice, one act of kindness had rippled outward, touching lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. And that's the lesson this story leaves us with. Sometimes, the most powerful changes begin with noticing someone's struggle and choosing to act. It doesn't take fame, money, or influence. It just takes a willing heart. If this story touched you or reminded you the power of empathy, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a moment when someone's kindness changed your life, or when you were able to help someone in need. Your story can inspire others, just like Lena and Mr. Grayson's story has inspired so many. For more heartwarming and inspiring stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV and hit the notification bell. Every story here is a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can make a world of difference. Remember, compassion has the power to change lives, and it can start with you.